Tristan Peterson here for Seems Good Magic. We're about to enter a daily here. I'll do some recording, do a deck tech before we start. Appreciate those who watched the first video that I put out for Seems Good Magic. Some of the feedback I got was basically that my sound was crappy, so I have chosen not to listen to Pandora, and I have also disabled all the sound effects on Moto, so hopefully that will help out. To bear with me, I got a little bit of a cold, so you'll hear me cough from time to time. Before we get started, I wanted to kind of share my thoughts on Chris Van Peter's article that he put out 6/19 on Star City in the free selection. One part of the article that I found really interesting, he's talking about obviously Junk Rites, which is my deck of choice at the moment. He's kind of been championing this deck for about basically 6 months, 5-6 months. I've written a couple different articles on it. Was this section here, basically where he basically goes over the main, the main decks in the current metagame, and then how he feels that Junk Rites matches up against it. Jun, I think, is probably correct. Even I'd actually give a slightly favorable matchup to Junk Rites in that. Red-green aggro, slightly unfavorable. I think that's, I agree to that. The green-red aggro, which is kind of a more mid-ranges type deck. Depending on their draw and depending on our draw is basically who's gonna win. Bent Hexproof, definitely the worst deck for Junk Rites, and I'll be going over that in my sideboard and some of my ways for attacking that. Definitely the worst matchup. Esper Control, I feel is generally favorable. They do run far and away a lot in Esper Control list, and I have found that to be difficult to deal with when they typically far and away my Angel with the exile triggers on the stack. Can be more difficult to deal with. But if you can get out early with Slime, basically in any of these control matchups, you're going to win. If they go long, then where they're able to resolve Aetherling, then they're probably going to win. So it kind of depends. You really have to watch. The key turns there, in my opinion, are basically turns 4, 5, 6 are going to kind of determine the outcome of the game. The Not Humans list, which is more of a mid-range humans list that can have aggressive starts, I think that's probably right. Even Naya Blitz, depending on their draws, can be definitely slightly unfavorable, much like the red-green aggro list. Hence some of the choices that I make in my main deck. Not aggro, this is kind of the new deck on the scene. I've only played this a handful of times. I definitely think that's probably correct in his assumption that they're even. Any of the traditional mid-range decks, Junk Rites definitely has a favorable matchup. Not only do we slime to keep them off certain colors and slow them down, but the late game is just so hard for them to deal with. I mean, they will have Selesnya Charm Angels of Serenity from time to time, but like I said, this is a very favorable matchup. Hence why these decks have kind of fallen out of favor. I did play Dark Naya for about a month right before Dragon's Mace came out and really liked that deck a lot. And definitely remember having trouble with the Reanimator list. Junk Aristocrats, another new deck on the scene. My experience has been this too, slightly unfavorable. And I've made some changes to my deck to kind of deal with this and the other Aristocrats, Lingering Souls type decks. Aristocrats Act 2, it's a little bit slower, and then Junk Aristocrats has a little bit less synergy because you can't scavenge with Varals. So I definitely think that's right. Reanimator, I think he's right. Gaining Edges in the Mirror Simple, if you have the correct read on the previous week, I think that's correct. So I also think Gaining Edges is dependent on sideboard too. I know I've played this matchup many times in paper and online, and if you know how to sideboard correctly, you know how to sideboard against the list, then you're probably going to win. So hence sometimes even because Reanimator is so strong, you see Death Rites creeping into the main board. 4-color Reanimator, I've played this deck in paper. I actually think Junk Rites traditionally has a little bit more favorable matchup. He claims they're even. I have lost to it, basically just catching me off guard with Harvest Pyre. One of the first times I ever played the deck was the only time I ever lost to it. But he claims they're even. I actually think the traditional Reanimator list has a a little bit favorable matchup against this, just because you can keep them off of colors with slime, and then you just have to play around things like Harvest Pyre, Blast and Massacre. Basically, you have to watch out for Boros Reckoner. Keeping things up like Abrupt Decay is very important in that matchup. The 4-color Reanimator list is an interesting list. I'm up in the air as far as what I'm going to play at a PTQ I'm going to this Saturday, if I'm going to play 4-color or if I'm just going to play the traditional Rites list. 4-color definitely has more favorable matchups with Bent Hexproof. So if I'm expecting that to be big, I'm probably going to play 4-color, just because you have access to Blast and Massacre. You have access to things like Rolling Trembler, which can kill the Geist of St. Traff, can kill the Invisible Stalker. You attack the deck a lot differently by basically wrathing their board. It also has a little bit more favorable matchups with Blitz and the red-green aggro decks, because you can wrath their board, and you're also playing Reckoner, which can slow things down. So overall, I don't know. I'd be interested to see I don't know if Van Meter's played this list at all, how he feels it would match up against things. I definitely think 4-color is probably a little bit weaker to Jund, and also a little bit weaker to these traditional mid-range lists, because you're not sliming lands at all here. You're more on kind of a burn, playing with Blast and Massacre and Harvest Pirate. So that's kind of my take on Van Meter's article. It's a good article, again, in the free section. He's advocating some things that I don't do, but I don't think are necessarily wrong. It's just more of a play style. Blood Baron definitely has been creeping into the list. I think he's good. I've considered adopting him myself. We're not playing him this daily, but it's something I may try out in the future. He's also going back to the Crater Hoof plan a little bit. I've played that, and I don't necessarily think it's bad. I still definitely think, with Jund being such a large part of the metagame, Bonfire just is too good to be really going into a heavily Lingering Souls plan. This deck also runs it. Also seen some other, the mid-range decks can run it here, mid-range. So when Bonfire's out there, Bonfire's going to be big, Lingering Souls is not as good, and hence reanimating Crater Hoof is not as good. So it's kind of my take on that. We'll go do deck tech here, and then I'll pause it, and we'll go into the daily. So here's the deck that I'll be taking into the daily today. A little bit different than the deck that I played and streamed before. We've done some things different in the main board today. We moved Sin Collector to the sideboard entirely. Cut one from the main, added Garrett to the main, and then another Garrett in the sideboard. Otherwise, pretty much we're same in the main board. We are making concessions to aggro and preparing for that in the main board by basically running these types of things. Garrett's also good against control, but he's really good against the aggro list. So this is kind of making a concession, saying that we know we're weak against aggro, particularly game one. So we're going to kind of main deck some preparing for that. I do like one Sin Collector in the main. That's pretty much become an entirely sideboard card, but you catch people off guard with it, and Nailer Sphinx's Revelation. But today we're going to try it as a sideboard card. So kind of talk about those cards. Grizzly Salvage, pretty traditional. I run 6 Mana Dorks, 4 Pilgrims, 2 Elves, 3 Mulches, 4 Thragtusk. I think 2 is the correct number on Slime at this point in the metagame. I just think that's probably correct. You don't want to remove these guys entirely. Sever's there mainly for Olivia. Also is beneficial against the aggro list if you catch them on the right draw. Resto is really good on 4 of those. 4 Angels of Serenity. So sideboard's a little bit different than the last daily. I had initially added another Sever to the sideboard, and I still have it for Aristocrats because I was having issues with that list. This time we've added Golgari Charm for the Aristocrats. Typically what I was running into is if they had a sack outlet and I severed a Spirit Token, they would just sack my target, and then I basically 1 for 1, as far as removal, I'd kill 1 Lingering Souls token. With this, I can hit all of their tokens. Now I'll lose my Mana Dorks if I have them out too, but I think that's probably stronger. Also, can hit enchantments. So you can nab a Rest in Peace, you can nab a Ground Seal. So that's kind of the change to the sideboard here. 2 Sin Collectors we talked about, Sever we talked about, Death Rites mainly for the mirror match. Pretty much only comes in there. He's also not bad against Esper Control. I've tried that out. 2 Centaur Healers again to help with aggro. Garrett pretty much always comes in. Game 2, Game 3. In any matchup, he's good. That's why I moved 1 back to the main. Ray Revelation, good card. Comes in against Juns. You know, the ability to flash back after you mulch past it is good. Another Abrupt Decay for aggro. Sylvan Primordial, and this is kind of one of my favorite cards in the list, just because he's a big dumb guy, but he catches people off guard. I've had multiple people actually swing into him, not realizing that he has reach, just because he doesn't see a lot of play. He's kind of my 4th slime. Rather than going 2 slimes on the board, I go 1 Sylvan Primordial and 1 Acidic Slime. Sylvan Primordial, if you watched the last time I streamed, I started adopting this card because I was having issues with Thunder Mahel-Kite, and so he blocks Thunder Mahel-Kite. Sideboard, the most unfavorable matchup, like I said, is Bant Hexproof. I've been attacking it with Slum Reaper, which helps to make them sat guys. I found that it'd be effective. They typically only have 2 creatures on the battlefield, so getting Slum Reaper out at the right time can be really good. Abrupt Decay also comes in, Ray Revelation comes in, and this time Golgari Charm comes in. Basically, these all attack enchantments. Acidic Slime also attacks enchantments. Sylvan Primordial attacks enchantments. In this matchup, I bring in basically those 7 cards. I take out Tristani. I take out Garrick Snot. He's good at fetching up, so I actually leave him in and probably actually bring that in too. Sever's terrible. Angels of Serenity, I actually take all 3 out. They're just not good in the matchup. Thragtusk is okay. You want to be able to gain life. On Barrow Rites, I'll usually take 1, possibly 2 of those out, depending on how I'm feeling about what I'm seeing. So that's the list I'll be playing. We'll get started in the daily here in a minute. So we're back. We won the roll, so we would like to play first. This is a difficult hand. Oh yeah, we're probably going to shift this hand. Let us scout our opponent though real quick. It's Allison Brie, one of my favorites. So, who are we playing here? Probably we mulligan this hand regardless, but let's try to get some information. I'll do some garage selling tomorrow since I'm scouting some things out here. I'm on the wrong website. Okay, this person's been around with Little Sisters of Modern, so really no read on what that could be. So we will mulligan. Much better hand. I love that the double salvage hand. It can really make me shape things. I've got Abrupt Decay in case we are on an early aggro plan, so we're going to keep this, and we'll go from here. Oop, we won't mulligan. So we'll lead off with Overgrown. Probably into Temple Garden, obviously, because we got to have black and green. this here. So either they're AFK or having some connection issues, or they're double queued. Well, let's look at something else here. So in a couple weeks, I'm going to be going to Kansas City for the GP down there. It's a fairly decent driving distance from Minnesota. Probably going to play a variant of Affinity. Well, I know I'm going to play a variant of Affinity. This list that I've got thrown together here right now is kind of a variant of Paul Rietzel's list that he played at the GP. And then I believe Ziv also played the same list, and they both made top 8. I don't have Thoughtseizes, so I don't have those on the board. But really like Master a lot in Affinity. It's a big deal. Thoughtcast. Any large tournament, I basically relegated myself. If I'm going to play in Affinity, I'm going to be playing 4 Thoughtcast, just to help with consistency in drawing. I'll probably be playing some number of Arcbound Ravagers, whether it's 3 or 4, just because this deck can have some issues with basically the Street Wraith deck, where they load up their graveyard and then they cascade into I forget the name of the card and get all their guys back, and exile and then throw them into their graveyard. So it's some difficulty there. Otherwise, you got the standard package. I've run 4 Overseers, really good with Arcbound, 4 Drums, Signal Pest, Opals. Really happy that I got these both cheap in paper and cheap online. The card has skyrocketed in value. Probably one thing I don't have on the board that I'm probably going to add to the board, just because I've been seeing it and testing online a lot, is I'm going to be bringing back the Canonist for Storm. Since Finkel top 8'd with it, at the last GP, I think I expect to see it a little bit. If I happen to make day 2 in Kansas City, I'll probably see it at least once. This list can race Storm. It's one of the few lists that can race Storm in Modern, but Canonist also helps. We're still waiting. They did lose their connection, so we'll hang out here. They lost it at 2:06, so they just lost it. If they basically don't do anything until about 2:12, we probably will end up just winning. By the way, it started daily. I've had that happen a handful of times. Doesn't happen very often though. A win off of a lost connection. I experimented with a lot of lists back during the Modern PTQ season that ran Thoughtcast and Galvanic Blast. These 2 cards are just so good in the list, but finding the right balance between them is difficult, particularly finding the right balance in land too. So do you run a basic mountain? You know, was one of the questions that I had. You know, because you run it, if you're running masters, you know, you want the blue if they do happen to path a guy, but do you want that red? You know, it's a question. I think that's probably right. I know in the article that I think Ziv wrote for Star City, he talked about wanting more Galvanic Blast. I think 2 is probably the right number. Dispatch is really good. I've main decked that before too. Where it shines the most is against particularly Wormcoil Engine and Tron. You just dispatch it, or Baneslayer Angel. It's just dispatched. You know, you can get rid of things very easily. You know, big difficult creatures. You know, even Emrakul, you just dispatch it. You know, so those things are good. Blood Moon, great card. I've won so many matches off of just dropping a Blood Moon turn 2 or 3, particularly against Tron type list. Even the control lists that are in multiple colors, they're just shut down because they can't fetch, they can't do anything like that. Still waiting. Let's find that name of that card. So Street Wraith obviously reprinted in Modern Masters. There it is, Living End. Living End, not reprinted in Modern Masters. This is a good deck. It kind of was around. Now the eggs has basically been nerfed quite a bit, and Storm got nerfed quite a bit. You know, if people are looking to play combo, this seems to be the deck of choice. I mean, they basically just use these guys in cycling. Put them in their yard, put them in their yard, you know, put them in their yard. And then cast Demonic Dread, usually, or Violent Outburst, like in the middle of combat. And then they cascade into Living End and get other guys back and dump all mine guys, you know, exiled, get exiled. Or sacrifices, yeah, they go into my graveyard. So Archimon Ravager is really good against this because I can respond to Living End, and I'll sack all my guys and put them in the graveyard, and that way when Living End resolves, I get all my guys back and lose my Ravager. And so it works out. That way I'm not just completely dead on board afterwards. I mean, they don't really interact with their opponent all that much. Obviously the list we're looking at here, running Fulminator Mage, also running, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really the only actions they're doing other than attacking after they cast their Living End. I tend to bring in, there it is, this guy. This guy comes in against me when I'm playing Affinity out of their board. So he obviously comes out just as kind of a removal spell for an artifact, and then they bring it back, Living End, destroy another artifact, and he's a decent sized body at 3/3. Well, we've been AFK here for a little bit. Looks like we might just get a free win. Yep. Well, has won the game. Won the match. So we're not to round 1, huh?